Howdy, everybody. September 21st. It's my birthday. That's right. Still here, still surviving. It's actually a beautiful day. Tomorrow will be the first day of fall. And I hope you guys are hanging in there, doing well. I'm almost done. Only have about 10 more papers to grade on the Shakespeare. Before I start on your next one, which is the Dutch Painters, Essay 3. I'm going to sign Essay 4 this week, not till the end of the week though, because I'm trying to catch up with the grading. But in the meantime, please keep up on the announcements and the discussions on classical music and the documentaries I'd like you to see. Mostly, I'm just signing this history of music. It's 6 parts, and it's really a wonderful BBC series. We're not going to have time to go through it all, but you'll see a couple episodes and try to understand and trying to grasp the importance of the meaning of music, which is the sound of our humanity. It's that important. What sounds do you listen to? Do you listen to music? Do you listen to popular music? Are you guys listening to who's popular right now? Lady Gaga is probably already old. Justin Bieber's old. We don't need him. Who are you guys listening to? Are you listening to boy groups from South Korea or TikTok music or soul music from the 60s? Are you doing that? I doubt it, but maybe you are. Do you like oldie stations? No, probably not. That's your dad's and your grandpa's stations. Music from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. They got a radio station for everything. You guys listen to hip hop? Is rap your thing? Street? The culture divide between African Americans and white America. Do you listen to who's popular right now? Who's the most popular in the hip hop world? I like the older stuff. Tupac and all that. He's dead. A lot of the good hip hop artists are dead because they get murdered because they're gangsters. They live in a violent world, and they're rapping about the violent world, and that's why the music has meaning. They're holding up a mirror to their world. That's what all great art does, and I'm going to keep expressing this through these lectures. And that's what you're looking for. Cultural context is really important to understand these artists that we're dealing with. What was going on with the Dutch painters in the culture for them to thrive, for them to paint the paintings they painted? What's going on with music? Right now, we're on essentially chapter 26 in the text. And on 203 or so, it starts with Mozart. A couple pages later, we go to Beethoven. You're probably going to be writing the 4th essay on those artists. So get prepared. Be prepared. I'll send the documentaries, the usual stuff. I want to keep reiterating about the essays. I'm still getting a lot of 1 and 2 page essays. It's 3 pages minimum, folks. 3 to 5 pages. You need to do 3 pages or you automatically lose 2 points. And it's only 10 points. So 2-point loss is 10 points. If you miss 10 points, you go from an A to a B. So you can lose your grade pretty fast. You don't want to do that. At least do the 8 pages. Shakespeare, there has been thousands, which was the last paper I've been grading. There's been thousands of pages written about William Shakespeare. Surely you can manage 3. It's not that many. Double space, 1-inch margins. And I want you to base it on the documentary I assigned, not on Wikipedia searches. That's fine to do research. I expect you to. But I'm not really interested in their dates of birth or their death or who they married. I'm interested in why they created what they created and how it changed our world. And it did. All these people we're talking about literally changed our world. And they're still changing. People are still trying to figure out Shakespeare to this day. And that's how deep and meaningful it is. And that's the impact he had on our culture around the world. They perform Shakespeare in Chinese and Korean. How does he translate? He does very well because he's talking about the human condition, and that transcends all cultures. It's just not when he was writing in England. Um, that's why it's still so important, and that's why he still matters. It's not that he mattered, even though he did in his day, because he was successful. He was a successful artist. But why he still matters to this day, why people are still scholars, are still researching the depth of his writing. Now, a lot of you in your essay would mention that there's not a lot of information about his birth, his childhood, his education, and this type of thing, which is fairly common for those days. This is long before we had records. They weren't keeping birth records. They weren't keeping death records. So a lot of it's word of mouth passed down through history. And so some of it's sketchy. But all we need to know about Shakespeare is in the plays and in the sonnets. Everything we need to know. And he was holding up a mirror to his own life, his own loss. He lost a young son, Hamlet. Yes, that's not quite spelled Hamlet, but it is spelled, there's no L, but it's close enough. He simply died of the plague, which a lot of people did in those days, just like they're doing now, folks. Except for then, they didn't have any medicine. There was no antibiotics, there no penicillin, there were no COVID shots, nothing. So you usually died. And it took young and old. Thousands and thousands of people died in these plagues. Shakespeare himself didn't live that long, but that was pretty long actually for his time. 50 was considered old age. Can you imagine? I should have been dead long ago. Anyway, modern medicine, modern food, modern everything keeps us going forever. So when I assign these papers, look to the art they created, not just their personal information. And so this next one is about music. So what is it about the music these artists created that is still being performed to this day? 500-year-old music. Why? Has there been better music since? That's left up to the many critics, but probably not. I mean, yes, you might think pop groups are better than Mozart, but he started it all. He was kind of a rock star in his day. And he was a bad boy. He liked to be misbehaved, just like our rock stars do today. But it's the music itself that was coming out of this child prodigy that resonated and still resonates. You don't have to like classical music. A lot of you said, I've never read Shakespeare, or I only heard of it, or I had a high school class about Romeo and Juliet, that's fine. That's kind of typical. But I suggest that you go into the deep discovery of some of these artists if you really want to see who we are. And when you really study Shakespeare, you really just take one play, read it, get the notes on it, study it, research it, watch documentaries, watch all the movies, and you'll see layer after layer after layer of mystery and brilliance and holding up the mirror to who we are. Not everybody could do that. People are trying now with YouTube and TikTok. They're holding up a mirror. Some of it's pretty silly. Some of it looks pretty silly to me. That's okay. So, at the end of this week, I'll assign the next essay, which won't be due till next week, because I'm going to go on a small road trip and I'm going to be in hotels and stuff, and it's going to be harder for me to stay in touch on the internet, although I'll do my best. So I want to kind of wrap it up, so for a couple days I could take this road trip without too much letting you guys down. Don't want to do that. You can always get a hold of me. I'll tell you more about it later. You can always text me or email me. I will have my laptop and my cell phone and all that good stuff. So if you get behind and you need some help, whatever. This week, a few of you, because of COVID, have had legitimate excuses. I don't need excuses. If you're late with a paper, you'll lose points. Get it in. But as you well know, I put an ending date on it. But let me know, and I'll open it up for another day or two. I did on the Shakespeare. I don't know if you saw my notices. It's easier for me to open it up again than for you to send an attachment to my email, because I get so many emails, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So I'd rather just open it up for another 2 days or so. And it tells me what day you handed it in. It tells me that you're late, and you will lose some points for being late. But it's better than 0 points. Like I said, you could go down from an A to a B within 10 points, one paper. So it's important to keep the papers going, even if they're lousy. Do the best you can. I believe in you. I know you can do it. Put some time in. So thank you for joining the discussions. That's important to keep the discussions going. It lets me know that you're participating in the class. Yes, I read them all. I look at them, and I see who's being naughty, and I see who's being nice. And I see who's participating. And if you're not participating, I shave some points off of your participation. So, classical music, do you listen to it? Does it mean anything to you? Is it just some boring music you hear on NPR radio when you're flipping channels? Does it all sound alike? Why is it different? Why do we still listen to it after all these years? It takes a large orchestra to perform these pieces, or a small quartet of instruments, classical instruments like violin, viola, cello. It's not rock and roll, folks. It's not electric, although they do plug in. What kind of music do you listen to? And you can talk about that. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to stay on music. I'm going to try to cover up until current times. I'm laying the groundwork now from 500 years ago. And then we're going to go into Middle Times, American folk music. We're going to go into American blues, jazz, rock and roll, of course. Punk rock. Do you like punk? I do. Do you like Nirvana? I do. Hip hop. Who do you listen to? Who are the pop divas? You know who they are. The popular people right now. When you listen to the music, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel bad? Does it make you feel something? But right now, this week, we're doing classical. And that's what your paper is going to be about this week. I'm just looking at my notes here. These artists that I cover throughout this whole course are usually artists that were considered radical for their time, game changers for their time, innovators. They weren't sometimes understood in their time. When we start talking about Van Gogh, he was not understood. We'll talk about more contemporary painters as we go along the course. Van Gogh, as you might know, is the guy who committed suicide. Sold one painting in his lifetime to his brother. Now he's considered a genius of the highest order. But he was mocked. He had lots of brain trauma. He was in and out of mental institutions. He's the guy that fell in love with a prostitute. She spurned him. Can you imagine being spurned by a prostitute? That's rough. They're supposed to say yes. And he's the guy that sliced part of his ear off and sent it to her. Maybe you've seen that. They made several movies about it. We'll talk about this later on. Tortured artists. Never understood in his lifetime. Not like these artists I'm talking about. Mozart was understood. Beethoven was understood. They lived large. They were famous in their time. This is long before social networking. This is long before any way to get their music out of the world, before recording was a possibility. You had to see them to hear the music, or see an orchestra playing their music somewhere. And their music started spreading out in the world, even to the United States of America. You could hear Mozart being played, not by Mozart himself, because by now he's long dead, in our new country, 1700s. People knew who Mozart and Beethoven were because of the printed word, newspapers, which traveled all over the world. And they traveled by traders, ships, shipping lines. And they would bring the news of different worlds, the Netherlands, Italy, Moscow, China, Africa, South America. That's how we got our news. And it took weeks. It took weeks to sail from Italy, from US to Europe. It took weeks. You really had to have some patience to cross that big ocean, and it took a lot. And it wasn't easy. That's why mostly people, up until a certain time in their history, never moved more than 50 miles from the home ever. Now we're 50 miles from our home every other day. We go to Costco if it's 50 miles from our home. Now we're kind of a nomad land. Has anybody seen that movie? We move a lot. We move around. Our culture is moving. We're on the move. We're not satisfied, so we move from. The last 5 years, I lived in Portland, Oregon, Joshua Tree, California, if you know where that is, Santa Cruz, and now I'm back here in Redding. That's just common. That's just normal. Seems like. I was going where the teaching jobs were and where my latest love interest was. That's always good. So we move around more than we ever have in our whole lives. In past generation, my grandparents, which would be your great-great-grandparents, maybe even three greats, I don't know, they never left their hometowns ever. They never probably left the house they were born in. They lived in there all his life, and they died in that house. That was really common. And so here these musicians are creating music that radiated out into the world, spreading the news through sound. And that's why they're important. That's why they're still important. And it's hard to get your head around it with our instantaneous. We could text somebody around the world instantaneously in Africa right now, and they will respond to our text within moments. It used to take a year to get to Africa. People wrote letters that would take a year to go somewhere. That's how long they waited. There's no telephones, no smartphones, no texting. Can you imagine? When's the last time you shut your phone off and just sat with quiet? It's not easy, is it? We feel like we're losing out. We feel like we're cut off from the world. Well, that's how the world was at one time. And so people like Mozart and Beethoven, I want you guys to read that chapter. Hope you guys have the book by now. If not, I can't. Because we're in that class. I used to read. We used to read out loud in the classes. We can't do that anymore. Because it puts it in context. Not just with what I'm saying or the documentaries. I'm only talking for 20, 25 minutes. I can't provide all the details. It's too much. I'm just giving you a thumbnail sketch of these brilliant people. You don't have to like Mozart to appreciate who he is. You don't have to like Shakespeare to appreciate who he is and to see the deeper meaning of their lives and the art they created. In a world full of disease and hunger and war, and somehow their art survived. And that's the power of art. That's the power of music and paintings and literature. It's more powerful. It survives plagues. It survives death, warfare. It survives. And that's why it matters. More later. See you later.